For the News and Observer, I'm Captain Bureau Chief and Under the Dome host Don Vaughan for this special recording of the podcast. We're here at the North Carolina Museum of History in downtown Raleigh in the Daniels Auditorium. As Bill mentioned, this is our first time hosting a live event to record the Under the Dome podcast. Thank you to those of you who are joining us this evening. And thank you also, and welcome to our guests, Democratic Senator Natalie Murdock of Durham and Republican Senator Vickie Sawyer of Mooresville and Iredell County. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
You're also both podcast alumni who have been on before, and you get it's the sticker just for alumni and everybody that came for this. So I feel like we have to start with kind of the big news that's been going on the past day or two. And Senator Sawyer, I'll turn this over to you first about the law enforcement officers that were killed in Charlotte just yesterday, I guess, as we're recording this on Tuesday. And I know the news is still coming out, but anything that you wanted to say about your district, about just what happened?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. I spent my morning talking to my Fraternal Order of Police Lodge president, those who are my friends who are in the CMPD, those who are of us who serve in the Statesville PD who lost their friends, folks that I knew. U.S. Marshal Thomas Weeks lost his life, Sam Pelosi and Alden Elliott also, who were officers with the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction, also were killed. And Joshua Iyer died from his injuries with his wife and his family by his side. And forgive me for being emotional, but I know these folks. And I listened to my friends openly cry this morning because this is the third time in the past month that either Iredell County or CMPD police officers were under fire. In fact, my sheriffs of Iredell County said that over 400 rounds were exchanged in the last few. And when I heard from each and every one of those men, as I talked to them this morning and tried to hold it together as they could not, they were so frustrated that they work hard to put criminals behind bars, and yet others work so hard to let them go. What I heard from them today was, as soon as we lock them up, they get out. How are we to protect ourselves? And how are we to protect you? So forgive me for being a little emotional, but this one hits very close to home. And I do want to let my folks know that I talked to today, and those across North Carolina who are listening to this, who serve in law enforcement, that we do need to look at why criminals are being let loose on the streets, and why us North Carolinians are not safe, and why our police officers are continually under fire. Thank you, Dawn, for allowing me to talk about that.
So Murdock, before you talk, I wanted to also thank you both for, obviously you are different sides of the aisle, willing to have a conversation with me and each other during this. And of course, there are lots of things that you do agree on. Lawmakers always like to say that we report on only the differences. There's a lot of things in common, and there are a lot of differences too with policies and response and everything else. So Murdock, I'll turn it over to you. And same question about the Charlotte.
Yes, definitely more than anything, just not only heart goes out to the families of those who've lost their lives. It's my understanding Mayor Vaughan spent some time with those families, also was very emotional. And as someone, in Durham with our police department and sheriff department, from police chief to sheriff on down, definitely consider a number of them friends and having family members that serve. And it is one of those fields where for you to put your life on the line every day is a lot to ask of someone, but they still took the call to keep our community safe. So just heart goes out to that family, still kind of following exactly what happened there, but goes without saying, just tragic, and just praying for those families.
Representing Durham has gone through a lot over many years, and especially recently with a lot of homicides and gun violence. Do you see legislative solutions to that? Do you see local community? How do you see, just as a Durham leader, responding to something that you have every day there, really?
Yeah, definitely. I view the issue of public safety and crime holistically. I think that I'm coming off of visiting a lot of schools, and it's my understanding, particularly with young children, you can kind of see, if they're going in the wrong direction as early as first, second grade. And for some young people, you've really got to get them back in the right direction that early on. So I am supportive of really addressing the root causes of crime, not just education, but opportunities after school. I'll give a shout out to Sidekicks Academy. And the reason I have to use that as an example and start in our schools, we luckily, thank the majority here, we're able to get $25,000 for that program in Durham. And what the principal shared with us is Sidekicks Academy. It's a program where students are able to do Taekwondo throughout school and after school, but it's not fully funded by the school system. One elementary school in Durham, suspensions are down. When you look at those who end up getting in trouble or breaking the law, a lot of them started off getting suspended in school. So we definitely know the school to prison pipeline is real, but something that I am glad that we are doing in Durham is really a mix of a little bit of all of it. They have reinstated bonuses for officers. We did just simply have a lot of vacancies to be the city the size of Durham, did more recruitment, so that has been helpful. Our last few rounds of police academies have had more graduates, but we've also started a separate community safety program department. The Hearts program has already received national attention, and those are unarmed social workers. I think particularly with our law enforcement focus on that violent crime, I think they end up becoming social workers when that's not what they signed up to do. I think if we know for sure it's a mental health crisis, send someone that wants to focus on that, and we actually have a reduction in violent crime of 3% of doing a mix of doing more with school, after school programs, the Hearts program, along with supporting the officers that we have.
Senator Sawyer, do you see legislative response to anything what's happened in Charlotte or elsewhere, just overall on the issue that you kind of already alluded to a little bit?
Yeah, according to my sheriff this morning, 70 to 75% of all violent crimes are committed by repeat offenders. So why are we letting them go out and terrorize our folks, and me and my children and our families, and especially our men and women in blue? We have enough laws on the books. We just need judges and magistrates and those in the judicial system to keep them behind bars until they can receive either their punishment that is due to them. Perhaps they go through rehabilitation or go out, but the recidivism rate is so high. So I understand that. I'm so grateful that Senator Murdock mentioned that there are measures to be taken at a young age, because I do believe in that holistic approach. But once the time has come when someone has committed a violent crime, they should serve their time in jail and be taken off the streets so that we can all enjoy North Carolina and not be in fear of our lives.
If you want to add anything later, we're open to that with the conversation. I've got kind of a wide range of topics that we'll talk about. So since we're talking about law enforcement, some local law enforcement has been active down the street in Chapel Hill today with the protesters at UNC. So I feel like we should talk about that. And both of you serve in areas with universities, or if not immediately in your district, then around it. Again, as we're recording this, holding this, it's, things are happening now. How are each of you seeing both the response, to and from the protesters, and if you see anything from, there should be, a state response, the universities, and then obviously the broader issue of what this is over. I know that's a loaded, long question. So.
Yes. Yeah, I'll jump in. A proud Tar Heel. It is always a good day to be a Tar Heel. So, I'll start with when I go back to my time as a student there, was very active with an organization called the Black Student Movement. And so definitely participated in a number of peaceful protests. One was actually we organized with students and on other campuses to have one right downtown, just a result of some organizations that weren't very supportive of diversity. So we came down and made a protest around that with thousands of people showed up for that protest. But regarding current events, still monitoring the situation. And so, as you know, I think even as of 2 hours ago, the situation on campus has changed. And definitely for administration, they really are working to make sure it remains peaceful, make sure it remains respectful. What I love about the university setting, it is a time to challenge. It is a time to question what you thought you believed and say, why do I believe that? I know that was my experience at Chapel Hill. I learned of different viewpoints. Even serving as a legislator, that was actually the first time I read conservative literature, I'll be honest, learning about different political movements. But I will say it is a difficult situation that they're in. And I think we were watching it knowing that at some point, the administration would have to decide what they were going to do about the encampment, but definitely know that students have a right to protest. And I think the reason students are protesting is they feel helpless, they want to feel heard, they're very passionate about their causes, but above everything else, we do have to keep everyone on campus safe, especially with it coming to the end of the school year. We know other campuses have canceled graduation. It's my understanding they're not going to do that at Chapel Hill, which I think is a good call. So just whatever we can do to be respectful of different opinions, but to do it in a respectful and safe way.
Yes.
Senator Sawyer.
There has to be some sort of social construct that allows for a safe place to have dialogue, but yet not to have students tear down the United States flag and replace it with a Palestinian one. And then also to be throwing water bottles at the folks who are trying to replace the flag back to which it should be there. We've been here before. I mean, you can look in your history books and see that there were violent protests in the 60s and the 70s. And you also saw Ronald Reagan as governor of California do this. So although this seems like a very fresh and new problem, it is where we've been before in history, and we see how these always end. I hope these students realize that in order to be taken seriously, then they need to understand how they can sit down and have a civil conversation with those that can make true decisions and not just be vagrants and vandals and violate and tear down their universities. At what point are we going to hold these young children accountable for public destruction? I mean, it's almost like my child is sitting there tearing up her room and, being a destructive force. And I go, okay, no, you just want to have your feelings out. No, we need to have some sort of balance to disruptive behavior. And when you've crossed that line, then you are inviting law enforcement to come in and to take the actions that they need. And I don't understand why or how that these folks feel empowered to tear down the very university that we spent, 19% or 14% of our budget to fund our university systems, and they can just go in and just remove and destruct and destroy? I just don't get it. I'm sorry, I'm probably not being very PC on this, but it just absolutely just tears me apart to see that type of behavior on our university system.
Both of you, there's UNC Charlotte and Duke and NC Central University, and then,
Yes.
of course, lots of other schools around here, and just seeing how that might play out. It seems like the focus now has been Chapel Hill, or if there are do you think there's any lessons learned from this from the college leaders or those that want to protest somewhere else that they should be considering going ahead?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely one of those situations, especially a campus like Chapel Hill that really prides itself on, being open and being inclusive, of striking that balance of maintaining student safety, but still allowing students to share how they feel. And I think, in addition to just kind of how to manage this specific incident, I think that you can't ignore the angst of these young people when it is happening nationwide. So I think that there is a reason. I definitely think conversations need to continue to occur. And I think it's happening because they feel they want to make sure that various viewpoints are at the forefront. But when students feel targeted and attacked, that is definitely when lines have been crossed. So I think that's what every campus is struggling with. Of you don't want to only have focus on one group, and then students that are also seeking higher education, just trying to be students, they also should not be in environments where they feel uncomfortable. So it is a difficult balance and a tough needle to thread.
Okay. You're state lawmakers, so you don't have the control, obviously, that Congress does. But if you want to talk about your foreign policy position on the Israel-Hamas war, here's your chance. I'm sure you've heard from plenty of constituents, even if you don't have that control at the state level.
I want to ask those kids who are tearing apart our campuses, if they were in Palestine right now, what kind of voice could they have? Let's be honest. You're sitting here destroying your own country to support a group of folks who, by all means, are mostly terrorists, who do not value women, or who do not value lesbian and gay rights, who do not value transgender rights, and who have been terroristic forces in the Middle East for as long as you can remember. If you're going to stand up for something, know what you're standing up for. And get out of your bubble and figure out that the United States is the best country in the world. And you can be heard anywhere, anyhow, if you do it peacefully. I was a kid who grew up in a trailer park in middle of Davidson County, and now I'm sitting on stage in front of you fine people on a podcast where my voice is being heard across North Carolina. How cool is that? Would that happen in almost any other country in the Middle East, or well, at least in Israel it would? But yet you're going to sit there and tear down our country at the expense of a country who would not want or support you? I think they just need to get out of their phones and open their history books.
Senator Murdock, do you want to add anything else before we move on to a different topic?
Just generally, I'll share, for me to try to simplify this issue would be an unwise thing for me to do. It is so complex, and I say that as someone who was blessed with the opportunity to travel to Israel and Palestine before the conflict. So very complex issue that goes back not only decades but centuries, but definitely heartbroken by footage that we see of hostages. So I would be remiss if I didn't say we definitely doing everything I can to be supportive of my congressional members to bring those hostages home. I actually have a constituent whose brother is still missing in my district, so met with them, and also heartbroken by the destruction I see in Gaza. I'm a human being. When you see mothers, when you see babies that have no options, that are malnourished, it is understandable why folks are outraged. So I'm not going to simplify it. I think we have a long way to go as far as how to get this right. I definitely think there are things that we can do better, but I'm hopeful that we will reach a turning point with this.
I'll change it to, we'll go back to other things you disagree on, but we'll pick maybe something that you guys have something in common on next. You're both on the Transportation Committee. Senator Sawyer, you chair it. Our Charlotte Observer listeners and my colleagues at the Charlotte Observer suggested to ask your opinion, Senator Sawyer, about the R line. And because Charlotte has light rail, and Senator Murdock, you are involved in the light rail that didn't happen in the triangle. I guess maybe there could be common, a lot of people have strong opinions on transportation, even though it's much less controversial than other topics, obviously. So I guess Senator Sawyer, What do you think of the R line? We'll start
The red
with that
line?
first.
Yeah, the R line, the red line. Well, for our
I'm sorry, red line.
It's
I called it
okay.
R line. You know what? It's because of downtown Raleigh. I was thinking of the. Yeah.
It's all right, no worries. I'll talk about an R line if you want me to. The red line is something that has been promised to my community since 1998, when the local leaders got on an actual car and went down from Davidson to along 77 to Charlotte, and they forgot one important thing. They forgot to invite Norfolk Southern to the party. So they had sold a transportation tax for our area, and guess what? They couldn't deliver on it. So we have been living with this idea that we were going to have mass transit, and totally bought into the idea of it going from South Iredell all the way into Charlotte, which is definitely a heavily traveled corridor, and 77 just wasn't meeting the cut. Move forward to where we are today, there is an opportunity for this actually to happen, and there is a caveat that the city of Charlotte has said that don't worry about that promise back in 98. You know, we tried, it didn't work out, so let's do this. Hey, if you pass a sales tax increase, then I'll give you your red line. So as a person who's lived in that community since 1998, moved in Charlotte in 93 and grew up in Davidson County, I just am not holding my breath, because if I was, I'd have been passed out a long time ago. Do I support and think the idea of a mass or commuter railroad line or some sort of commuter along that thoroughfare is needed? Absolutely, absolutely. My family pays over $300 a month in tolls. We do. It's expensive. There would be a great another alternative. Although I do want to caution folks to say that you're asking for a tax increase on a promise that was made 20 years ago. So that doesn't necessarily go over very well. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying that you better show me first.
That's fair.
Norfolk Southern reminded me of the Durham Orange Light.
Oh boy, the good old days. The good old days.
What do you want to see the transportation committee do? How do you see this? Obviously, like seeing how things played out in Durham and the future of the Triangle. I think all of us drove here. Even if you live in the city of Raleigh, there's no metro or subway to hop on, and sometimes not a bus either. So,
yeah, I think in broad terms, our state is growing rapidly, and glad that we have another transportation chair here with us this evening. And so we really do have to provide more transit options, more options that will get you out of your car. And I think especially since we have so many folks moving here from all over, coming here from New York and DC, and where they're really accustomed to having those transportation options, even New Jersey. I think it is a matter of how to do it, how to get it right. We do know that BRT is finally moving forward in Orange County along with Wake County, and but I do, full circle, it's a big part of kind of how I learned how the General Assembly works years before coming to senator. And when the light rail was rocking and rolling, our big roadblock was losing the ability to get 25% funding from the state. And even in the prioritization process back then, we were pretty much told, like, even if it happens over a number of cycles, we'll figure out a way to do it. So even though that project didn't move forward, for Charlotte, it was huge. For Charlotte, getting that 25% is how they were able to get so many lines. And no matter what technology we use, we definitely have to figure out something. And not only for transit, we'll love more support for sidewalks and bike paths, for all of it. Even before we had the change where they're kind of grouped all together, I think just if the percentage for that funding could go up, it's something that a lot of local communities to see and want to see. And yes, we are proud to be the #1 state for business and growth, but with employers have Chatham County. And we're already talking with full speed of how we're going to get the workers there. How would they get to work every day? We know folks will be coming in from multiple counties. So it also is an economic development issue when people can't move around. It's also difficult to get to work. So I would love for our committee to do more on that topic, but I think it starts with looking at how projects are prioritized and figure out how we can be more aggressive in supporting high capacity rail and a high speed rail project that's already on the table with the S line, it was funded, my understanding, in the House budget, but not the Senate budget. So that is some low-hanging fruit. The state of Virginia has already provided that state funding. The federal government has signaled they'll fund it. So that would go a long way, since FTA has provided, I think, over $1 billion in funding for transportation in this area.
You mentioned the budget, and of course, we're all excited to talk about the budget.
Well, can we follow up on that one real quick?
But I was going to say, and also
S-line.
want to know what your transportation committee, priorities are this session. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about the S-line. And quite frankly, I've been drilling down in my co-chairs, as well as Senator Lazar, who's here with us today, and Senator McGinnis. And we need to look at options. We need to look at transportation options. But we also need to ask the Board of Transportation and that agency to honor the commitments that have been on the books for the last 20 years. If you look at my neck of the woods, as we say in the South, but we have two major highways, I-150 and 73, that were both slated to have been widened beginning back in 2017. And because of the board budget shortfall, these projects that were, remind you, they were promised 20 years ago, are not going to be built 5 years from now. So when the agency sits there and they goes around and says, you get a road, and you get a road, and you get a road, but in 20 years, but now I want you to invest in a high-speed commuter rail to a place that it only serves one portion of our state, when there already is 3 options to get to DC. How do I go back home and say that we need to give them another $400 million to complete something that may or not be done in the next 15 years, when that same $400 million could go fix Highway 150 or 73? Remember, these are promises that were made by the Board of Transportation years and years and years ago, that people all over North Carolina have been waiting for their road to be constructed. I'm not saying that roads are the end-all be-all. I'm just saying that we have got to sit down and have an honest conversation about broken promises that have been made to North Carolinians over the past 10 years.
Either during this legislative session or how you see it playing out in the elections.
I want to I'm very proud of the common sense protections that we put in law last session to protect women and children. For the first time, state employees now have paid medical leave and family leave. They had not had that before. Now they do. We also helped with foster care, relieving some of the red tape. That was an amazing thing that we did that doesn't get talked about. And we also increased the child care subsidy. Those are protections for family that protect women, and that we have worked as a General Assembly. And actually, I'm very proud of that. As we look towards these things that are culture wars, I don't necessarily see it as a culture war. I just think as a common sense. I grew up playing softball and tennis and basketball, and I'm a terrible golfer. But I do enjoy being able to hit from the red tees, right? I would never be able to be asked to another captain's choice ever again if I have to hit from the blues or the blacks, like my male counterparts. But in some regards, it's just common sense. Again, these questions about why we have to pass a law for sheriffs to actually follow the law, and why do we have to pass laws to protect women from not being annihilated in their sports, and something that I've fought so hard for my entire life as a coach and as a player, to make sure that women have an outlet to be successful in sports. If you'd have asked me those questions 20 years ago, I would have thought this is like the craziest thing, but yet we're sitting here having these conversations. So no, I don't call it a war. I call it a protection, and us protecting a way of life of 99.5% of the folks that we represent. After all, isn't that what we do? We listen to our constituency, we protect those people, and we try to do the best darn job that we can. But so forgive me again, I'm going to push back on that war idea, because for me it's just protection, and protection of a way of our lives.
Senator Murdock?
Yeah, I would add, I'll expand on why, for me, they're culture wars. I think when it comes to the legislation for sheriffs and ICE, sheriffs are honestly some of the most powerful people in this state. And I think they have the training, I think they have the education and the skill set to know, what's appropriate and what it is that they need to do. And I think when it comes to what we've seen with the women's and sports bill, the reason I view that as a culture war is we've shared we still can do better with education. We've shared that, we know that we have educators that are leaving the profession. And I share that as someone who, was an athlete, through high school and a proud product of public schools and tour schools throughout my district, throughout this state. And even when I talk to young people, most recently as last week, it's caring about their classmate that can't afford their school lunch. I always have them write me letters in crayon that I love sharing with my colleagues. It's we want more recess and more time to play. So a lot of what we work on as legislators, not only am I not hearing it from educators, I'm not hearing it from the children, because students are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. So I just think that particularly with anything regarding the schools, if we could just, go in there, we may not agree on how to fund the schools and do that. We really could have very, boring sessions, right? What makes the headlines are that red meat of these sorts of bills that are not just falling out of the sky. We see them filed in various states. We often look to Florida and know, okay, it's coming. So as we, get to talking about DEI, we saw it in Florida where it happened abruptly. Hearing UNC happen really quickly at a trustee meeting. And as someone that is proud of the time that I spent at UNC Chapel Hill for something to be done so quickly without a lot of discussion, without the ability for comment, to me is concerning. But can't say that I'm surprised. I think when we at the Supreme Court level saw the case around affirmative action, we knew that more was coming. We knew it would happen in academia, even in businesses. There's discussion around programs that help minority business. So I know I'm committed to calling it out and saying that I think it's concerning. I think that there is a way to respect the differences that we have, but not have unforeseen consequences on communities that may not have the ability to advocate for themselves.
We're at about 45-ish minutes, so I'm going to maybe wind down our conversation a little bit. I need to acknowledge Senator Murdock. You work for the Biden-Harris campaign. You're a longtime Josh Stein supporter. I know that you all support the candidates of your party, so I'm not going to ask you to just repeat that. I am going to ask if each of you were running for governor, and maybe you will one day. If you want to announce that here, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Exclusive.
Or something else.
Yeah.
What would you do different than the person that has your nomination for your party if you were running for governor this year?
That's a big question.
And don't give, if people listen on past podcasts, I asked Attorney General Josh Stein how he was different than Governor Cooper, and he talked about liking ties or not. So none of that. No, I mean, something, how would you, policy difference, how you would run a campaign different than Stein and Robinson?
So politics is all about timing, right? And I think these two candidates, both in their own regard, have great timing for which we are in right now. And I think if I were to run for governor, and it would have to be a different time. So I don't know what I would do differently than either of these two men right now and that are ours. What I do know is that we've had primaries, and that is who the state has elected to be our representatives. And whomever wins, I do want to make sure that they understand that transportation's number one. And to support transportation. So I'll be interested to see what happens in the future. And for right now, I'll just hold my opinions.
Yeah, great question. First, I'll applaud the sitting governor, Governor Roy Cooper, and as you know, had the opportunity to work for A.G. Stein, and will continue to be a surrogate on his campaign. I mean, I'll add, I think Governor Cooper gets a lot of it right. I mean, I think that is why, from polling, his popularity is so consistent, and he's won twice, in North Carolina with Trump on the ballot, which is no easy feat, which is why led to him becoming president of the National Association for Democratic Governors. So I think there's a lot he gets right more than anything when it comes to public education. Making this the year of the public school, I thought was so smart, just to highlight what all of us see when we visit our local schools.
What would you?
So as far as how I think they're running strong campaigns, but obviously, as one of the viewers added, I do a lot with women's rights and actually even globally. So I probably would have an entire rollout around supporting women and girls and kind of how that looks from young girls in school all the way to working moms. So would definitely have a flavor that would lean into policies that would support them, whether it be in school. And honestly, thrilled was able to work with majority members to have funding in public schools for things like menstrual products. So there's a lot more that we can do there. But that's something to focus on women and girls.
Okay, so the difference in Stein's campaign. Senator Sawyer, do you want one more round of anything you would do different than Robinson's campaign?
No, ma'am.
Okay, just giving everyone the opportunity.
Yeah.
So we are
transportation.
Yeah.
She said one.
We are running out of time, but longtime Under the Dome listeners know that I always ask people what's their headliner of the week, and we're not voting on it. It's just what you think. So I'm not going to ask this week since we're recording on Thursday, but it is April 30th as we're recording. So what is your headliner of the month? Being on the Under the Dome podcast.
Senator Murdock and Senator Sawyer are headlining Under the Dome podcast. Of course, that's my headliner. Let's see. The headliner for me is that the General Assembly comes back to a short session.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Me too. Just like the red line.
All right, Senator Murdock.
Headline of the month, House, Senate, and Governor came together and said that we will fully fund public schools and pre-K. Headline of the month. There you go.
It's the headline you would like to?
That's the headline that I dream of.
A lot of
that's
believe
the headline
it.
I dream of us
Believe
agreeing on a strong budget for North Carolina.
There'll probably be some economic development news at some point, but all three of them will be at. So
yeah.
Okay. That's all the time we have for today. Again, I'd like to thank Senators Vickie Sawyer and Senator Natalie Murdock for being our guests, and all of you Under the Dome listeners in the audience for joining us this evening. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you.